Welcome to the Deep Dive by Talk Tickers.
Good to be here.
Today, we're jumping straight into Capricor Therapeutics, ticker CAPR, specifically their Q2 2025 earnings call from back in August.
Yeah, and this one, it wasn't really about the financials, was it? I mean, they were weak, but the real story was the regulatory situation.
Exactly. They got that complete response letter, the CRL, back in July for deramiocel. And this call was all about, well, what happens now? How do they navigate this?
Right. And the market, it reacted pretty sharply. Lots of skepticism about whether management can actually pull this off.
So our mission today, let's dissect that regulatory path they're trying to carve out, understand why they're shifting clinical goalposts, and pinpoint the key things you need to watch in the next few months.
Sounds good. Let's start with the numbers just to set the scene. They weren't great.
No, definitely a miss. GAAP EPS loss was 57 cents a share. Consensus was looking for a loss of $48.
And revenue, basically zero, which sounds dramatic, but it's compared to $4 million last year that was tied to an agreement that's now fully recognized. So zero was kind of expected, but still not great optics.
Right. Net loss overall was about $25.9 million for the quarter.
And like you said, the market noticed. The stock took an immediate hit after hours. It just underlined how much rides on getting this drug, deramiocel, back on track. Execution risk is the whole story here.
Okay, let's dig into the financials a bit deeper, specifically the cash situation. How long can they keep the lights on?
As of June 30th, they reported about $122.8 million in cash, equivalents, and marketable securities.
And the company line is that this gets them into late 2026.
That's what they maintain, yeah. Late 2026 runway.
But what about the burn rate? Is that runway realistic?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. Operating expenses were up significantly, around $27.7 million for the quarter.
And R&D must be the driver there.
Absolutely. R&D, even excluding stock comp, jumped to $20.1 million. That's up from $11.7 million in Q2 of 24.
Wow, quite a jump.
It is. And they said it's mostly due to the late stages of the HOPE-3 trial. Remember, the last patient had their last visit in June, and all the pre-commercial manufacturing work, the CMC stuff.
So they're spending heavily to get the data finished and hopefully get ready to launch, assuming they can fix the regulatory issue.
Precisely. Which brings us back to the fact that everything hinges on approval.
And they did flag potential cash injections that don't involve selling more stock, right? Non-dilutive options.
Yeah, they highlighted two big ones, both totally dependent on getting that BLA approved. First, an $80 million milestone payment from their partner, NIPP-owned Shinyaku.
It's significant.
And second, the potential to sell a priority review voucher, a PRV. Those can be quite valuable, sometimes fetching around $100 million, though the price fluctuates.
But again, both only happen if deramiocel gets approved.
Exactly. It just reinforces that the regulatory maze isn't just a clinical problem, it's fundamental to their financial survival right now.
Okay, let's tackle that maze head on.
Yeah.
The Complete Response Letter, the CRL, for deramiocel in DMD cardiomyopathy. Received in July. What were the FDA's stated reasons?
The big one was insufficient evidence of effectiveness. They also referenced some previously noted CMC, the manufacturing items, although we'll get back to that.
Insufficient evidence, that's tough. So what's the immediate fix or the plan?
The absolute immediate focus and the biggest catalyst coming out of the call was the Type A meeting with the FDA. It was actually scheduled for the week of the call, so mid-August.
And a Type A meeting, just to clarify, that's their first formal sit-down post-CRL to really hash things out with the agency.
That's right. It's critical. It's where they try to get clarity and agreement on the fastest, most efficient path forward. What exactly does the FDA need to see?
And Capricor went into that meeting with a plan, right? They submitted a briefing package.
They did, a comprehensive one, apparently. And they outlined a couple of potential paths they were proposing.
Which one?
Path number one, basically asking the FDA to reconsider the BLA they already filed. Management still maintains that original submission met the requirements.
Okay, maybe a long shot after a CRL, but they're keeping it on the table.
Seems so. Path number two, supplementing the current BLA with more data, specifically data from the HOPE-U03 trial.
Ah, the HOPE-U3 data. Let's talk about that because there's a twist there. It's fully enrolled, 104 patients. Top-line data expected Q4 this year.
Correct, but here's the kicker. Management stated very clearly on the call they will not unblind the HOPE-3 study data until they get clear guidance from the FDA after this Type A meeting.
So they're holding the data back. Why?
It's a strategic gamble, I think. It suggests they might be concerned about what the data shows relative to the original endpoint, or perhaps they just don't want to muddy the waters while they're trying to convince the FDA about a new endpoint.
Wait, a new endpoint?
Yeah.
You're trying to change the primary endpoint after the trial's basically done and after getting a CRL based on the original plan. Isn't that usually frowned upon?
It's definitely a bold move, and yes, changing endpoints post hoc is generally a red flag, but they're building a specific case here based on the disease.
Okay, explain this shift. What was the old endpoint and what's the new one?
The original primary endpoint was PUL 2.0, the Performance of the Upper Limb Test, version 2.0. It's a measure of skeletal muscle function, arm and upper body strength, basically.
Right, focusing on the muscle wasting aspect of DMD.
Exactly. But now they've amended the primary endpoint to left ventricular ejection fraction, or LVEF, measured by cardiac MRI.
LVEF. That's purely a measure of heart function, how well the heart is pumping, why the switch.
Their justification is crucial here. They're pointing to new external data, some apparently funded by the FDA itself, through the Office of Orphan Products that strongly links LVEF decline directly to morbidity and mortality in DMD patients, specifically the cardiomyopathy aspect.
So the argument is, while muscle function matters, heart function, measured by LVEF, is actually a better predictor of how these kids will do long term, especially regarding survival.
That's the core argument. They're saying LVEF is a more objective, clinically meaningful, and validated measure in this specific rare disease population where heart failure is the leading cause of death. It's not just about muscle strength, it's about keeping the heart working.
So they're telling the FDA, look at the new science. LVEF is the real measure of benefit here, and our trial is powered to show a difference on this endpoint.
Precisely. They believe HOPE-3 can show a statistically significant effect on cardiac function via LVEF. It's a calculated attempt to redefine substantial evidence for this disease.
A risky strategy, but if the FDA buys the scientific rationale, it could work.
It could. And maybe helping their case amidst all this clinical complexity was some genuinely good news on the manufacturing front that came out just before the call.
Ah, yes, the CMC issues mentioned in the CRL. What was the update there?
This was a significant positive. Management announced the FDA had formally accepted the resolution of all the 483 observations from the pre-license inspection.
Okay, unpack that. 483s are inspection deficiencies, right? So the FDA saying Capricor fixed all the problems found during the manufacturing site inspection.
Exactly. And getting that formal acceptance separate from the CRL process is a big deal. It essentially takes a major chunk of the CMC risk off the table. It validates their manufacturing processes, and quality systems are now considered ready for commercial production.
So they can walk into that Type A meeting and say, the factory issues are resolved.
Yeah.
Let's focus purely on the clinical data and the LVEF endpoint.
That seems to be the play. They specifically noted the CMC items mentioned in the CRL have either already been addressed through that 483 resolution process, or they'll be formally addressed in their response package post-Type A meeting. It cleans things up considerably.
Okay, so huge focus on deramiocel, obviously. But they are trying to show they're not just a one-trick pony, right?
Right.
What about the exosome platform?
Right, stealth exa. They're definitely trying to diversify the narrative beyond DMD. They had some progress there. The FDA cleared the IND for their exosome-based vaccine program.
An IND clearance. Okay. And any clinical activity.
Yes, the NIAID, part of the NIH, actually initiated a phase 1 trial for a COVID-19 vaccine candidate using this platform.
Interesting. Still COVID vaccines.
Well, the trial is assessing different antigen formulations, but the broader strategy here, as management laid it out, is positioning StealthX as a potentially next-generation non-mRNA vaccine platform using native protein antigens.
Trying to fit into that niche federal agencies are supposedly looking for beyond mRNA.
That seems to be the angle. If they get good phase 1 data, it could open doors for partnerships or non-dilutive funding down the road. It gives them some optionality, but it's clearly a longer-term story than deramiocel.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's pull back and look at the investor context. How has CPR stock actually performed against this backdrop?
It's been rough. Year over year, the stock was down over 60%, maybe closer to 63%, largely driven by that CRL in July.
And how does that compare to the broader biotech sector?
Well, the XBI, the main biotech ETF, had a pretty strong rebound leading into the fall. September, October timeframe. CPR saw a bit of a recovery, but much more modest.
Which tells you.
It tells you the market is laser focused on Capricor's specific problems. The discount isn't just sector sentiment, it's pure execution risk tied to getting deramiocel approved. The whole valuation hinges on it right now.
So boiling it down, what are the absolute must-watch catalysts in the next, say, 3 to 6 months?
Okay, 4 key things, really. Number 1, in the most immediate official feedback from that Type A meeting, what did the FDA say? What's the path? What's the timeline?
Crucial. Number 2.
The HOPE-E3 top-line data readout. Still expected in Q4, but remember, it's contingent on the FDA giving them the green light to unblind after the Type A meeting discussion.
Got it. 3rd.
Any formal BLA resubmission. If the Type A meeting goes well, when do they actually refile the application? That's a concrete milestone.
4th. Longer term.
Yeah, much further out. But any initial signals or early data updates from that StealthXR phase 1 vaccine trial? That speaks to the diversification story.
Right now, though, the stock price seems to reflect maximum pessimism about that Type A meeting outcome and the LVEF strategy.
It does. The market is basically saying, show me the FDA agrees with your plan. Until then, uncertainty reigns.
Which, naturally, leads us into our This Is Not Financial Advice segment.
And the usual disclaimer applies here. We're talking about market dynamics based on the call, purely hypothetical. This is definitely an aggressive idea, not a recommendation.
Understood. So what's the outrageous but plausible trade idea stemming from this situation?
Okay, the setup is this. The stock is beaten down, pricing in a high probability of continued regulatory failure or significant delay after the CRL and the weak financials.
But the Type A meeting outcome is binary almost. It could be really bad or surprisingly good.
Exactly. That meeting is the key inflection point. So the if the FDA was actually persuaded by A, the fact that all the manufacturing 483s are resolved, taking CMC largely off the table, and B, the scientific argument for LVEF as a clinically meaningful primary endpoint in DMD.
Then maybe the path forward they outline is much cleaner and faster than the market expects.
Precisely. If the outcome is surprisingly positive, maybe they don't even need to wait for full HOPE-3 unblinding for a resubmission path, or the timeline is shorter than feared, you could see a very sharp upward move. A short squeeze potential is definitely there given the negative sentiment.
So the trade itself.
The idea would be something like buying fairly short-dated, out-of-the-money call options, say expiring within 45 days, maybe targeting a strike price 25% or so above where the stock is currently trading.
Pure volatility play. Low probability, but high potential payoff if that specific positive catalyst hits.
Exactly. It's a bet purely on the Type A meeting outcome, surprising significantly to the upside and forcing a rapid reevaluation of the whole regulatory package. It assumes the market has overshot the negativity.
A classic speculative catalyst trade. Okay, let's recap the whole deep dive on Capricor's Q2 call.
We saw financials that missed expectations, but frankly, they were secondary. The entire focus was and remains on the regulatory path for deramiocel after the CRL.
Key developments were the successful resolution of the manufacturing inspection issues a clear positive.
The strategic and risky shift of the primary endpoint in the HOPE-3 trial to LVEF based on linking heart function to survival in DMD.
And everything hinging on the outcome of that critical Type A meeting with the FDA, which should provide clarity very soon.
Plus the ongoing efforts to build out the StealthX exosome platform as a diversification play, though that's much further down the road.
It really is all about regulatory persuasion now. Can they convince the FDA?
Which leads to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. Management argued strongly, citing recent data, that LVEF is directly tied to morbidity and mortality in DMD. If the FDA accepts LVEF, a measure of stabilizing cardiac function, as the primary endpoint for approval in this rare disease, what does that mean for other rare disease drug development?
Does it set a precedent? A potentially lower bar, focusing on objective stabilization endpoints tied to long-term outcomes, rather than always needing to show functional improvement, which can be really hard in slowly progressive diseases.
Could it open the door for more accelerated approvals based on validated surrogate endpoints like LVEF if the link to clinical benefit is strong enough? Something to chew on.
Definitely something to think about for the future of rare disease therapy development. We'll be watching that Type A feedback closely.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Remember, all the information we discussed today comes directly from Capricor's conference call materials and the related market context. We'll catch you on the next one.